Hey, what's up, guys? We're back here for another video on the deck, and I apologize if I'm squinting at any point during the recording. It's just that the sun's kind of blinding right now, and this is the first time I've been outside all day, so I'm getting a little bit adjusted to it. But today I want to grade Pittsburgh's wide receiver core, because it's a very interesting unit. There's a lot of moving pieces here. I think it's an underrated unit to some extent, because I love the individual pieces. I just don't like how Pittsburgh ran the offense last year. If we remove how terrible the offense was last season, and it was a terrible scheme, it worked. I mean, granted, it worked. It worked. It got us to a large number of wins. It got us to the playoffs. But just taking it out of context of the season, that's a terrible offense. And, I'm glad we're going to see some changes this year. And hopefully get back to running the ball, even though the offensive line, I have no idea how that's going to work out. But let's just try to focus on the receiving core for now. So starting off, who's the best player, who's the best receiver on this team? Bit of a tricky question, because all three guys that have their names in that conversation are totally different players. I'll bring up first is Chase Clearpool, obviously. Fantastic rookie season. I think he could have been an 1,000-yard wide receiver had he been in a more competent offense with a quarterback that had better deep accuracy at this point. Ben, obviously, a couple years ago, almost for the majority of the last 2 decades, was a great deep ball passer, at least had the arm strength to complete those deep throws. You saw it over and over again to whether it was Juju or Antonio Brown or Tavis Bryant. He had that arm talent. Mike Wallace, another one. But he just didn't have it as much last year. Obviously, Chase Clearpool had a couple moments last year where he connected on those deep passes, and here comes that blinding sun I was talking about. But Claypool's overall effectiveness and overall stats were kind of held down by the offense he was playing in, because I don't think he's going to be a fantastic short route receiver. I think he's going to thrive on those deep passes that go 15 to 15-plus yards downfield, basically. And you could see that. I mean, he had the explosive plays for us last year. I kind of refer to him as a DK Metcalf-light type player, even though he's actually heavier than DK Metcalf, but he's not nearly as fast. So I think he's the kind of player who's going to stretch the field in that sense. He can do stuff underneath. He can do shorter stuff, but I think that's going to be his bread and butter, is going deep. I really like Chase Claypool as a player grade. If I had to grade him individually, I'd give him maybe a B to B+. I don't think he's an A by any stretch of the imagination, but I think his physicality and just his pure athleticism at this point in his career has to put him in at least the B level. And again, I think he has the ability to be a feature receiver. I'm not sold if he's a true number one yet. I really don't know. We're going to have to see how it develops. We're going to have to see how this offense develops around him. But I think he's definitely a B at least. Now, Juju Smith-Schuster, I think he's a guy who's a perfect number 2 option. I don't think he's going to be a true number 1, despite that fantastic second year he had in the NFL, where I think he had over 1,400 receiving yards. This past season, everything, all the controversy with like TikTok and stuff like that. Listen, if TikTok is really throwing off your locker room so much, then you have bigger issues. This TikTok thing, I don't think is as big of a deal as the media makes it, or as big a deal as our fan bases make it, because, let's be honest, we had Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown in that locker room for years, and we didn't even know there were so much issues until after those 2 guys were out. So this TikTok thing, I really don't think it's a huge deal within that locker room. I just think there's a lot of people who on the outside who just don't understand it, or a lot of guys on the outside who just like to make fun of it. So I don't think that's a big deal. So we take that, put that aside, and say that's that's an overblown storyline. People need to get over it. Last year, not great for Juju. I think he had 97 receptions. The issue is, the average depth of target on those receptions were, around 6 yards? And that's not Juju's fault. Like, Juju's not the one who decides what routes he has to run. That's the play calling. That's on Pittsburgh not trusting Ben Roethlisberger's arm. That's on those kind of things. So that has something to do with it. Does Juju Smith-Schuster's maybe limited separation skills have something to do with it on the outside? Potentially. He might be better served playing from the slot role full time, but it is what it is. And I think Juju just got a raw deal last year because, like I said, Pittsburgh's asking him to run 5-yard slants, 5-yard in slants, 5-yard out routes. What do you want? What do you want him to do? There's just not a lot he can do in that kind of offense. Not a lot any kind of guy can do in an offense like that, or Ben's barely throwing the ball 15 yards downfield, especially in the second half of the season. So I think Juju, if I had to grade him, probably a B- to a B in that area. I really like him as a player. I really do. I really like him as a player. I like him in person too. He does a lot of great charity stuff off the field. He's a really cool individual. I don't follow him TikTok. I don't have TikTok, but he seems like a really nice guy from everything I've seen on other social media platforms. I think he gets a lot of unnecessary hate. So Juju to me, A B minus to a B type receiver. Really good second option. I just think he was misused last year in the offense. Deonte Johnson to me, he's never going to be an A, but I think he could be a high-level number 2 on a team. The issue is that he had so many drops last year. I think he had over 10% of his catchable passes turned into drops last year. I think that's what the stat is. So too many drops, and it felt like he just got into his head at some point. Like eventually, when the drops started piling up, he just got in his own head, and he never fixed it. So hopefully in the offseason, he kind of resets mentally, comes back in, and gets rid of those drops. But he was really good for us in stretches during his rookie season and this past year. It's just, again, those drops, you have to get rid of those. You can't be doing that and expect to be called the true number 2 option in the NFL. And I believe all 3 guys I just mentioned had over 800 receiving yards this past year. None of them had over 1,000. Pittsburgh kind of went with a wide receiver by committee approach, which is totally fine because you have 3 guys that can get you 800 receiving yards. Go for it. It's not a big deal to not have a true dominant number 1 when you have 3 guys who can all win individually. Because if you have say Jalen Ramsey out there and you blank your number 1 option, well, chances are you're going to win the second or third matchup. So you have to feel good about that. If I had to grade Deonte Johnson individually, I would say just a solid B right now. Lowest I would go, highest I would go would probably be B plus for his career. I don't think he'll ever be higher than a B plus. I think you could say he's B minus on his worst day because of the drops, maybe even a C plus just because he dropped so many passes during the second half of the season. But I really like his separation skills. I really like his versatility. I think that his floor is probably, or his ceiling is probably higher than Juju at this point. Even though I really like Juju as a number 2, but I think Deonte Johnson has more of the dynamic playmaking ability that a lot of teams look for in the NFL. Last guy I want to mention, because I know Ray McLeod is on the team. I'm a Clemson guy, so I really like Ray, but he doesn't do much for me as a true wide receiver. He's more of just a return man to me. James Washington is the 4th guy I want to talk about. Here comes that son again. Well, Washington to me is a very interesting case because he gets vertical. He's kind of the deep ball type player on the team. A lot of his passes go for over, he averaged over 13 yards per reception this past year. So a lot of his passes come deeper, similar to Chase Claypool. Although I don't think he's as dynamic as Claypool. But I don't know. With Washington, it's hard to tell because I feel like there's so much. It feels like there's more potential there than what we've gotten out of him so far. I think he had about 300 receiving yards this past year, and I think 5 receiving touchdowns, which is good production for a 4th-string receiver, but not 4th receiver on the depth chart. But yeah, I don't know. I like him as a player. I just don't know if we're going to keep him around much longer just because of all the mediocrity so far. I do think he could be a better contributor on this team. I think he could contribute 500 receiving yards, if not more, on this team. And in our lifetime, if he had been the number 2 option or the number 3 option on an offense when Ben was in his prime, he probably would have had more than 600 to 700 receiving yards per year. Again, if that was 5 or 6 years ago. But he's not the 3 option. He's the 4 currently. I trust him. I do trust him as the 4. I think I could trust him as the 3. He just got more opportunities. But again, those deep passes, there's a very specific route tree he's capable of running and running well. I just don't trust him to do all the underneath stuff right now and do all the little things. I love him as a number 4. Don't get me wrong. I think that's really good depth for Pittsburgh. I just don't think he's going to ever be more than that. So if I had to grade him, C minus to a C plus in that range, maybe just call him a straight C in that case. But I think that's about where he lands on the spectrum. And for Pittsburgh's entire receiving core, if I had to give it a grade, I would just stick with a solid B. I know that kind of like as a cop-out, you just give him a B and say, that's where we stand. But really, I think it's a average to slightly above average unit in the NFL just because of how much depth there is. I would have really liked to have seen this unit play with a prime Ben Roethlisberger, even like a Ben Roethlisberger from 3 years ago, to see how it worked out. Because I think then we would have been talking about them potentially being a top 12 receiving core in the NFL, somewhere in that range. I think he's probably right now, we're somewhere in range of 13 to 16. Maybe I don't know. I haven't necessarily looked at all the receiving cores yet. Maybe we're more 10 to 16. Maybe I underestimate them a little bit too much, but I don't know. I just feel like the offense limited them so much last year. Now going into the season, maybe if Ben's arm is better, which I don't think we can count on it being, but if it is, maybe we'll get to see the full potential of this group and see how it turns out. But right now, I'm sticking with a solid B for this receiving core. I think there's a potential it rises up and becomes closer to an A. Like I said, if you get a prime year from Juju, Deonte Johnson cuts down the drops, and if Ben's arm is better and Claypool can really open up the field for us, then I think you could definitely talk about being an A just because of the depth and all the options you have there with those three guys in Washington as the 4. But Again, relies all on Ben on how the offense is run this year. So we really can't. I can't really give him a complete grade yet because I don't know what Ben's going to look like. I don't know what this offense is going to look like quite yet. And I don't know if we're going to be able to recapture some of that versatility and that deep strike ability that we had a couple years ago when Ben, obviously before all the injuries and before having this past year where he looked statistically good until you realize that his average depth of target was under 10 yards and just really was not what I would call an NFL quality offense. But hopefully we can turn around this year, get a prime year from a bunch of these receivers, and maybe, just maybe, see our receiving core jump up to an A.